Hello and welcome to the 50-cent tour of Thursday, September 5th, 2013. Please find a seat on the Liberty bus and we will begin our tour. Today I'm doing something a little different with the tour. I have a few other articles that pertain, that at least are on the fringe of the information about Syria. As this one is kind of on the fringe. But a friend asked me yesterday, hey, I've seen some of what you've posted on Facebook about Syria. I'm a little out of touch. What is going on? You know, I realize there are busy people, people whose lives really just occupy them to the degree that they don't really have a lot of time to research what's going on and to be able to understand, comprehend it fully. I'm not saying I understand or comprehend it fully, but today I decided to put together a little primer on Syria, and I'm going to render out the regular tour video, and then I'll also render out a separate video that is just covering the primer on what is going on in Syria. But our first site on the tour today is, and today I'm using quite a few sites that I don't typically use. This is Whitehouse dossier. Now, I've never been on this blog before. I'm guessing this guy is heavily opposed to Obama, just based on some of the things that I see here. But I found this because I did a search for what I've characterized as the 7 scandals, the 7 Obama scandals. This article claims to have 24 and counting, and I didn't even notice the birth certificate and some of that in here, so this might not even cover it all. A few days ago I had an article that was 100 articles of impeachment. Now, I don't know, I didn't read that whole article. I don't think that there were actually 100 issues, but there are 24 scandals listed on this website in this article, and most of them are familiar to us. Some of them are older, some of them are newer, some of them are very, very specific. For instance, tampering with Sharyl Attkisson's computer. The hacking of Sharyl Attkisson's computer is a very specific, you know, if it was only one thing, maybe we could overlook it, but actually Watergate was something rather similar to this. So there are just so many issues, so many problems with Obama. And I am going to link back to the potential for impeachment at the end of the tour. I will now begin with the primer on Syria, what is going on. And I went back and began with General Wesley Clark, wars were planned, 7 countries in 5 years. And several years ago, this was the plan. And of course, Syria is one of the 7 countries. It has not been, it's been more than 5 years, thank God. And hopefully it's done. Hopefully we as Americans can say no and put this plan to rest once and for all. Here's a more recent article, General Wesley Clark, 7 countries, 5 years. And this is updated a little bit. Just basically the same information in another format. I wanted to, because I really want people to be able to understand and grasp these concepts, I have more than one article on a couple of the points. So just to be clear, after 9/11, a plan was put in place to basically gain control of the entire Middle East, and it was to go a plan to destabilize, attack, and restructure 7 countries in the Middle East in 5 years. I won't even get into, how immoral that is, what an outrageous plan it is. And this is the background for Syria. Syria is one of the 7 countries, and they are trying still to implement that plan on just a longer time scale. So that is a huge part of what is going on. Evil people who love wars, military-industrial complex, people who stand to benefit from turmoil and unrest and upheaval, have this plan that they want to implement. And Syria is next in their sights, and they're going after Syria. So that's background, that's history. Now, coming a little more into the present, how did this happen? Just looking for the patterns so that we can understand what is going on. This article is from early in August 2nd, 2013. CIA was smuggling weapons to Syrian rebels during Benghazi embassy attack. This primer is designed for people who don't spend a whole lot of time reading the news. This is included because people talk about Benghazi, what happened in Benghazi. The people who were supposed to be guarding this place stood down, and a bunch of people were killed, and it enraged the military to some extent because they lost men, and because they were told to stand down in a situation where it was not appropriate to stand down. But this was arranged, many believe, and there's evidence to support, to cover up the fact that the CIA was smuggling weapons to Syrian rebels. Now, just a little background. What's happening in Syria is a civil war. There is the established government that many people often refer to as Assad, and then there are the rebels. And the rebels have been stirring up contention, and many people believe that the rebels are Al-Qaeda, supplied and instigated by the Dark Cabal through U.S. resources like the CIA, portions of the CIA. So the very reason, to some extent, it's entirely possible that the very reason there even is a civil war in Syria is because dark forces working through the U.S. have been instigating war. And right now, people like Obama and those who support the cabal and are puppets and spokespeople for the cabal, they are trying to blame Assad, the current Syrian government, for all of the problems, when in reality the likelihood is very strong that it was actually dark forces from the U.S. Working to foment rebellion, upheaval, and civil unrest leading to civil war. Russia releases key findings on chemical attack near Aleppo, indicating similarity with rebel-made weapons. Now, if you do a search, you can find a lot of articles stating that Russia, I just found an article, I wanted to keep this brief, so I didn't include it, but there is a 100-page report that was completed by Russia, pretty much proving that the chemical attack was implemented by the Syrian rebels, who are actually Al-Qaeda, who are actually supported by the US CIA. So probably, a lot of people, this is a primer. If you have not been following some of these other things, the first time you heard about what was going on in Syria was the chemical attack. Well, they had video, they had photos, and, people expressing deep emotion, sorrow about all these children who were killed in this chemical weapons attack, and how terrible Assad is because Assad used these chemical weapons. Well, as I've just been stating, it very likely was not Assad at all. And you probably heard that the United Nations sent a team to investigate, to determine whether the chemical weapons were used by Assad or used by the rebels. And the evidence seems to be very strong that the chemical weapons were used by the rebels. But our government in the U.S. has become so accustomed to lying to people that they think if they show us some pictures of injured children and they tell us who to blame, we will just go along and blame who they tell us to blame. And that is what really is changing now, what needs to change. No, we are now asking questions. What really happened in Benghazi? Where did the chemical weapons really come from? Who really are the Syrian rebels? How is Al-Qaeda involved? And how is the CIA involved? And hey, we don't be fooled again, okay? So that's kind of where we are. The chemical weapons were used, and the West kicked their mainstream media machine into high gear, trying to convince us that because of the chemical weapon attack, we all need to blow Syria off the map, essentially. I mean, they're not saying that. They're saying surgical missile strikes, whatever that means. And, you hear phrases thrown around like boots on the ground. What that means is there's going to be guys there shooting people. That's what that means. That means people are going to die. And for what? So what is actually behind this? If we're being lied to by the media, what is it that is actually happening? Well, Max Kaiser, I think the man is a genius, making the world safe for Banksters, Syria in the crosshairs. And he explains some of the ways that the Banksters will benefit from this war. Some of the ways. There is talk also, and there's information out there about a pipeline that is set to go through Syria to bring natural gas from Qatar to Europe, and Russia currently supplies Europe with natural gas, and Russia wants to protect that interest in Syria, and that is one reason why Russia wants to protect the status quo. Also one reason why the Western powers want to change that, and I think that Western powers want to be able to get their natural gas from Qatar. Not to say that under capitalism they shouldn't. However, Russia seems to kind of be a voice of reason in the world right now. I know that is very surprising for a lot of Americans, but the BRICS nations seem to, of which Russia is a member, seem to genuinely want to bring peace and prosperity to more of the world than the Western dictators want. I mean, they've exploited Africa. They've exploited pretty much every area of the world where they've gained a foothold, and they've allowed some of their home countries like America and some of the European countries to do well, at least in the short term. But now, the vice is tightening on us as Americans, and it's time for us to become aware, along with the BRICS nations, of how the Western powers really are planning not only to control the Middle East, but planning to completely control us and take away as much of our freedom as possible. So, one of the possible outcomes, if you get these big superpowers involved on opposing sides, there's always potential for a world war. And when you have the potential for a world war, you have potential for nuclear attacks. Now, Russia warns of nuke disaster if Syria attack. This is not about nuclear bombs being dropped. This is about concerns pertaining to a nuclear reactor near Damascus and other nuclear facilities that could pose a threat of radioactive contamination if attacked. Yeah, like we need more of that, right? With Fukushima bleeding radiation into the Pacific Ocean. So there is this nuclear disaster possibility, but there's also, as I said, when you have potential for a world war, the people involved have nuclear weapons, and there is potential for the nuclear weapons to be used. And here's a statement from Putin pertaining to what the U.S. administration is saying about what's going on in Syria. Putin, Kerry's lies, pathetic. It's kind of, for those of us who are in the baby boomer generation, it's a little humiliating after having lived through the Cold War, just to watch as Russia kind of emerges as a force for justice and sanity. But that is what is happening, and that's just the way it is. And so I hope that I've brought to the table some information that is helpful to people who need a primer on Syria. I realize it's not extremely simple, because it's actually kind of a complex situation. But in this country, I think the things to watch are whether Obama will respect the Constitution and get congressional approval if he acts in Syria. And Hunter, this article from Washington Times, Hunter, Obama inviting impeachment if he strikes Syria without Congress. And this article was from Tuesday of this week, September 3rd. It doesn't look at this moment as if he will get congressional support. This is an article from the Daily Kos, and they are stating Whitehouse Oval Office speech on Syria attack still under consideration. And as I scroll down in the article, there is a statement. Meanwhile, the latest whip count from Think Progress shows 46 congressmen supporting an attack and 169 opposing it, a drop in support from yesterday morning's tally, which showed 47 in favor and 153 against. President Obama will be in St. Petersburg, Russia on Thursday and Friday for the G20 summit. So perhaps something will get worked out at the G20 summit. I find it interesting that the summit is in Russia. I think that it might behoove Obama and some of the people who go with him to go there humbly and perhaps willing to learn something instead of trying to tell people what's what. Because he doesn't, at this time, he doesn't seem to have the support of the Congress to attack Syria. If he does so without congressional support, it's a clear breach of the Constitution, and it is grounds for impeachment. So we will be watching that very closely. And this concludes the primer on Syria. And as this is on YouTube, if you have other links that you suggest to people, I hope that you will place them in the comments section. And I was hoping to really give people a basic understanding in as short a period of time as possible. So I hope I was able to accomplish that. For the daily tour, however, I do not want to stop with that. I want to finish up with a couple of articles about consciousness. John Rappaport today had an article in his blog called The Landscape of the Mind and Mind Control. And he's writing about that consciousness is more than the brain. And he ends up by writing about how very important our consciousness is in bringing transformation to our nation and to our world. And here's a quote from one paragraph. The knight errant on his journey comes to a point where he realizes that things as they are never going to reveal secrets of the psyche, no matter how deeply he probes them. Instead, tapping into imagination and creating that which was never before there is the key. That is the great change. That is the threshold that is crossed. Mind control in all its forms is designed to prevent this insight. It turns out that the vast majority of such control is self-induced. Although outside influences are involved, finally it is the person himself who consigns himself to a repetitive future of passive acceptance of things as they are. I am talking here about the difference between living a life that eventually dumps a person into a dead end and living a life in the open sky of imagination. End quote. And hey, I choose the open sky of imagination. How about you? And for our ending good news, I have this tremendous podcast that a friend referred me to. This website is companyofburninghearts.podomatic.com, and the podcast that I'm referring to is Joanne McFadder at Days of Wonder, and she talked about frequency and sound, and this is about consciousness and quantum physics, linked with a coming from a Christian background, and it's a beautiful podcast. I listened to it this morning. It's very moving. It has a lot of information about just how we release frequencies and the impact that has. And she talks a little bit about luge, although she doesn't call it luge. She just talks about how certain emotions attract demonic entities because they feed off of them, and how releasing love and faith and hope attract angelic entities, and that light is increased and vibrations are raised and good things happen. So I hope that you will enjoy that and be encouraged by that. It's about 68 minutes long, worth every second. The Daily Tour is a presentation of She Who Will Walk in the Dark Productions, and we thank you for joining with us in today's tour. The dawn is coming. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Hoping that you will love one another, take care, release positive vibrations, and insist on liberty.